Let's go.
I now turn it over to Mr. Carafe. Thank you.
I'll give you the happy buck, Joey. I want to say that it was so much fun in that dictionary project. It really was. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody. Okay. My pleasure to introduce Rochelle Delavan. Now, I have something that I probably won't read, but I might refer to in a second here because I've known Rochelle a long time, and I'm just delighted she accepted. She's a member of the same church. She's also a choir singer. She's phenomenal, Jim. Absolutely phenomenal. She's also the Director of Practice Development at Morristown-based law firm Riker Danzig. And I believe, according to her son Luke, who I happened to bump into last night at the Devils game, you've held that position the longest of anyone in the state of New Jersey.
Yeah, I've been there a few decades. Yeah.
Right. Rochelle lives in Madison. Right, how about that? Huh? Voted the best town in New Jersey.
I've heard that, yes.
Despite the mayor?
Oh.
What? Sorry.
You don't hold it.
You know, it's not about me, but my son just put in a bid that was accepted on a place in Madison.
Excellent.
Yes, we're in the right amount of town now.
So, this summer, Rochelle, this is the part I'm going to read because I want to get it correct here. This summer, Rochelle joined 15 other team members from the Presbyterian Church in New Providence on a mission trip to Northern Ireland, where they supported the community outreach work of a local mission organization to promote peace and reconciliation in a post-conflict nation. Okay, so I'm delighted to have Rochelle here this morning. Please come on up.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a privilege to be here. And like Jeff said, I'm actually my day job. I'm the Director of Practice Development at Riker Danzig Law Firm, which is marketing. In other industries, they would just say I'm the marketing director. Lawyers don't always like to think that they're marketing. But so I talk a lot about that, both to the lawyers and to organizations. So this is a little different for me, which makes it kind of fun. So I appreciate the opportunity. I do want to say first off that I'm not an expert. I don't want to hold myself out as an expert in Northern Ireland, and certainly not about their politics. But it was my privilege to be part of this team that went. We were in Rostrevor, Northern Ireland, which is right on the border, and it's a lovely Irish town, which if you've ever been to Ireland, you know there are so many of them. This town was not hugely affected during the Troubles in terms of violence. It's a largely Catholic town, but it is a place where Youth with a Mission has set up a center for peace and reconciliation, like Jeff explained. And Youth with a Mission, if you're not familiar, is an international organization that trains young people to go into different communities around the world and just kind of be there, be part of the community, do whatever's needed to help get to know the people, work, build things. And so they have a site in Rostrevor called Ancuan, and that's our team from the New Providence Presbyterian Church at Ancuan. Ancuan is Irish for harbor. And you can see in this next picture how apt that is. This is a picture taken from the lawn of Ancuan, looking out over the Carlingford Loch, which actually opens out into the Irish Sea. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot. And Ancuan sees its mission as actually being a harbor, being a place where people come for rest, for kind of getting recharged, a place where people come for training and then go out again. In Northern Ireland, there are a lot of these reconciliation communities, and they're ecumenical groups. They're not associated with an organized church per se, but they're a place where people from different political and religious groups can come together, can talk, can hopefully find things in common, discuss their experiences, their thoughts, and that's the purpose of Ancuan. One of the larger reconciliation communities in Northern Ireland is called Corrymeela, and the leader of that group, Padraig O'Tuama, who I had the privilege of hearing, he's a poet, he's amazing, but he said this about these reconciliation communities, and it kind of describes very well what Ancuan's mission is. To lead a place of reconciliation is to think of the stories that have been disregarded, that have been discarded, cast away, considered peripheral or ignorable, and to know that people have lived fragmented lives and they need to have their edges re-enlivened. Stories of hatred and stories of survival, stories of hope and stories of dreams, where dignity is a reality. Even if we cannot make dreams come true, we can regard each other. So that's kind of the purpose of all of these communities, and certainly on Kuin. It's a community that's based on love God and love your neighbor. And their intent is to be open, to serve the people of their area, to be a place of encounter where people can come together, people who are maybe have been enemies or at least brought up on opposite sides of the conflict there, share a meal, talk, be heard. That was a big part of what we did there, which I'll talk about more in a minute, but just listen to people's stories, which was fascinating and moving. So on Kuin has a lot, this is kind of turning around from the harbor and the planet from that perspective, but they hold a lot of events throughout the year for the community and actually all of Northern Ireland to come together to be reconciled. They have a Monday night harbor, which is open to anybody to come, to talk, to sit, to listen, to do nothing. They have every Friday night a community meal where anybody can come and be fed, and again, just sit at tables and talk to other people who are maybe different from them. They have a monthly open mic night, and they held one while we were there as part of a festival, but people come and sing, they tell stories, they read poems. Very interesting, you know, storytelling is very big in Ireland, and actually a lot of their music, their songs are actually storytelling. They're like 8 verses long, and they have some historical story that they're sharing, and they're fascinating. And what's also fascinating is a lot of people know all the verses and they sing along. It's like, wow, these stories that everybody shares. They host a border walk every year where they walk along the Northern Ireland border. And most of these towns along the border have very distinct identities, either Catholic or Protestant. And so as you're walking along, they're visiting with these people, and again, trying to just find places of commonality and places for discourse. And then they hold community fairs throughout the year where they have, you know, craft fairs and things like that. Again, the whole idea of it being to bring people in and find ways that they can connect together. But one of the big things that they do every year is this Fiddler's Green Music Festival. It happens every summer, and that was the week we were there, and that's why we went the week we did. We went to support the people in the mission who have roles and want to be out in the community, so we did a lot of their normal jobs, so they could be out and about. And then we also got to participate in the festival. It's an international music festival, and they hold different kinds of events all throughout the town at different sites, in churches, at pubs. At Kuin, there were some sites there, one of which was called the Night of Healing. It was really powerful. They had a dialogue between a British soldier and a man who had clearly been in the IRA, although he didn't say that, but he was in a paramilitary group, with a moderator holding a discussion about how they came to be involved in the conflict, what happened to them and their loved ones, and how they feel now about it. And for the people in the room, and it was packed out, there were hundreds of people there, people were crying. It was very moving. It was a real time of openness and healing for a lot of people, and we got to talk with some of those people before and after. But to back up a little bit, I guess, and explain about the political situation there now and how they got there. You're probably familiar, I'm sure, with the Troubles, which were 3 decades of extreme violence starting in 1969. Although some people would say, you know, a lot of them might say it actually started earlier because it's been centuries of conflict there. Some people would say it actually started in the 20s with the partition that divided the island into the Republic of Ireland, which if you ever travel to Ireland, that's likely where you are. You know, you fly into Dublin, you go to Cork and Galway and Killarney. That's all the Republic of Ireland, and I've done that, and actually when I did that, I didn't know much about Northern Ireland. It wasn't part of our tour. I didn't really think too much about it. But in the 1920s is when it was officially divided. So you have the Republic of Ireland, which now own country, and Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. So Northern Ireland is British, and the Republic of Ireland is independent. So there's a lot of feelings about that. So during the Troubles, it was really a civil rights situation. And you know, it's largely described as it's the Catholics versus the Protestants, but it's really not about religion per se. We were trained, before we went, we had a lot of training, but we were trained not to engage in the question, so are you Catholic or are you Protestant? Because that's what people want to know. That's how they know what box to put you in. And it's not because they want to know your religion, they want to know your political leaning. So if you're Catholic, you would be the Republican or the nationalist. They want to be independent from British rule. They want to be part of the Republic of Ireland. If you're Protestant, then you're likely a unionist or a loyalist, loyal to Britain, happy to be under British rule. So that's what they're trying to find out. So we were told, you know, the answer is, well, I'm American, I'm a tourist, I'm here for the festival. Because, as Jeff said, with the Presbyterian Church in New Providence, our natural answer would be, oh, we're Protestant. But that tells them, oh, you side with Britain. Like, no, you know, that's not at all what we're saying. So, and just to make the point of how true that is, that it's really political, there had been a few months prior a woman who went as part of another team. She was Jewish, and they asked her in so many words, so are you Catholic or are you Protestant? She said, oh no, I'm Jewish. And I go, oh, are you Jewish Catholic or Jewish Protestant? So the real question is, what side are you on politically? But it's really, as I say, it's the loyalists and the unionists who want to stay under British rule, be part of the United Kingdom, and it's the Republicans and nationalists who really want to be independent. So 3 decades of extreme violence, which we all heard about, resulting in 3,600 deaths, 107,000 people injured, and it's not a big country. So those two numbers together, that's 6.5% of their population. I mean, that's major. And to this day, they estimate that there's 500,000 people who are still directly affected by the grief and the trauma. Thus the need for reconciliation with these people. The situation today is that there is a lot of disappointment, a lot of resentment among the Republican nationalist side, because even with the peace agreement in 1998, there was the Good Friday Agreement. Bill Clinton was greatly involved in that. And that brought about peace in that the violence ended, and a lot of the things, the civil rights kind of issues were addressed. Up until that point, I mean, their real complaints were a lot of discriminatory things taken against the Catholic side, in terms of the opportunity for good jobs, education, housing, a voice in government. You weren't allowed to vote if you didn't own property. They couldn't own property. So it was a lot of these kind of issues, those were addressed, but they really wanted independence. They didn't want to be part of the UK. So at the end of the day, after 3 decades of great violence, huge losses, they're still part of the United Kingdom. So they're unhappy about that. They are the minority, but they are a very, loud part of the minority. And so, and another part of it is their identity. Who are we? We're Irish, we feel Irish. Our ancestors, our whole history is on the island of Ireland, but yet we're British. We're under the rule of the United Kingdom. And then you throw in Brexit, which is causing them a lot of uncertainty because of the border. I mean, the Northern Ireland border is a very soft border. It runs between farmlands and houses. They cross it daily. They shop back and forth. They go to school back and forth. They work back and forth. And yet, if and when the UK leaves the European Union, how's that going to affect them? And they're very concerned about that, as we hear a lot. I think one interesting thing is they're kind of at the forefront now of this Brexit thing. They're very important because their border is what's kind of holding up a lot of it. So that's something that they're happy that they're being heard, that it matters. And then you know, to a large extent, the violence has ceased. The paramilitary groups are disarmed, so we're not seeing the things that we used to see. But as you see in this picture, they call these the peace walls now, but these are these huge barriers that go across Northern Ireland, not completely, but in different places. This is in Belfast, where we went. They go for miles in Belfast, and they're separated at intersections, so that during the day, people can go through, but there's these huge metal gates that close at night. So you have miles of neighborhoods that at night are completely separate. But what's interesting is, the reason they're still there is people like them. The people in those neighborhoods, they're largely the Shankill Road area and the Falls Road area, which are hugely Protestant, hugely Catholic, and they feel safe. They know that the violence isn't gonna return because they have these walls, and so they don't take them down. They're very ugly, and it's very stunning to see this in a major city, but they're still there. And along different parts of it, they have these murals, some of which they have artists come in and do them. Some of them have political messages. The people in Northern Ireland really identify with other countries where there is division and conflict. So a lot of the murals are kind of in solidarity with things going on around the world, different messages that they have. And then there's parts of the wall where there's graffiti. And I don't know if you can read this, but human is human, we are all the same, be friends together, understand and love each other, God is love, He made us all. The messages are all very positive, and it goes for miles. So people come and write these things. So this, you know, this is part of their city today. So that's what they see all the time as a reminder of the conflict between the two sides. Another very interesting thing about where they are now is their education. You know, you go to school where your neighborhood is, and they still live in the neighborhoods their parents lived in, their grandparents lived in. The towns largely have one identity. So the kids are going to school with kids just like them. They're being taught the same history and biases, really, that their parents did. They're hearing all the time what the other side did to them. So that's another reason why they're not really getting past the resentment, is because they're just surrounding themselves, they're living in a bubble. So now they have a push toward integrated schools, and it's not a very good picture, nor is it a very attractive school, but it's the integrated school in Ross Trevor where we were, and a lot of the religious communities are encouraging people to send your kids to the integrated schools, so they see other children from the other side who are just like them, and they get to know them, and they get to know their families, and can move past all of the discriminatory ideas and biases that their parents and grandparents have held on to. So it's sort of an encouraging thing, but it's a hard thing, because some people have to travel great distances to take their child to an integrated school. It's much easier to take them to the school up the street. So that's an interesting thing. So what we did when we were there was we worked. So this is, every night they put up one of these charts, and you could sign up for things as long as there were slots for you. We worked around the mission, we cleaned, we cooked, we set up things in connection with events going on. We helped a lot with the Fiddler's Green Music Festival. They ran a cafe, and that was a big part of all of our days. We baked, we cooked, we served, we set up, we cleaned up, and that was where mostly we interacted with the people, which was so interesting. We were trained, as I said before we went, and we were told that people will want to talk to you. They're going to want to tell their stories to you. They're all coming here because there is an opportunity for them to be heard and to be listened to and understood. And I was sort of skeptical, like, you know, if I go to a cafe with a friend, I don't want a stranger coming up and, you know, intervening. I'm like, I'm here with my friend. But actually, it was really true. You know, you would bring them tea and keep coming back or whatever, and say, oh, do you live here in Ross Trevor, or are you here for the festival? Oh, we come to the festival, we come every year. And then they would start telling you why, and the events that they like. And as you start talking with them, they tell you their stories. And without exception, everybody there had experienced some sort of a loss during the Troubles, most of them in their immediate families. I mean, it was a very intense time. Another big thing that they experience is depression among their young people. And these are young people who weren't necessarily alive or experienced much of the troubles, but yet because of the climate and the situation, they are feeling the oppression of it, and there's a lot of suicides among young people, and of course, their parents and friends, you know, this causes them additional grief. One other thing I wanted to mention, the word troubles, I thought was so minimizing of such a horrific period. To call it the troubles makes it sound like something minor. And the reason they call it the troubles is because in the Irish language, they have their own language, there is no word for bereavement, the way we would say bereavement. And bereavement really means to lose something or to have something taken away from you. The Irish word for having something taken away from you, I can't say it, but it sounds a lot like the word trouble. So anglicized, it became trouble, meaning bereavement. So like we would say to somebody who suffered a death in their family, you know, we're so sorry for your loss. They would say, we're so sorry for your trouble. And so the troubles is kind of the, you know, the communal huge loss that they all felt across the country. So that's where that came from and why it makes sense for them. So this was our job chart. This is the cafe where we served people and visited with people. It's inside as well, but we were blessed with such gorgeous weather while we were there. It was sort of unexpected. Most of us were scrounging for t-shirts and things because we thought it would be cooler. So people were able to sit outside and stay as long as they wanted, and we could visit with them. And we picked up trash. There's a park across the street, Ferry Glen, and every morning a team of us would go and clean up. We would joke that we're just cleaning up so they have a clean place to party that same night, because every day it was massive. There was actually a, if you've heard of glamping, you know, camping with all the amenities. They had, this is on the other side of the park, and they have tennis courts, they have pools. It's not like when I camped with my family as a kid, I'll say that. But a lot of children, so we wanted the park to be clean every day, and it's a huge park. It's not as big as Central Park, but it's quite large. So we would clean the side of it that was near us and keep it good for them. And then also the music festival, we helped a lot with that. And like I said, there was storytelling, which was so interesting, poetry, a lot of music, very cool music, some of it on our stage in Anku, and that was me. I got to sing too, and that was fun. And Dave Ward from the church. So we had a good time with that. So it was another opportunity to kind of be with people and enjoy that. There was one night where we had a violinist, we had a flute player, we had a guitarist, and they would just jump in. It's so interesting in Ireland, if you go into a pub and some guy's singing with a guitar, if our violinist, who became a fiddler while she was there, Annie, I don't know if you know Annie, but she's amazing, she plays by ear. She would pull out her fiddle and just start playing a little, and they'd be like, come on, you know, so she would just jump in. You know, in America, you would never jump in on some band playing, what are you doing? But there, the more the merrier, and this was a place where we were listening to them, and some of us started jumping in, and we started kind of a back and forth. My friend Diane, who I think you know, Diane Kirsch, she and I would sing like an American song, and they would sing back to us an Irish song, and then we'd sing something, and then we had some communal things going. It was so interesting because they all sing, whether they're good singers or not, it doesn't matter. They know all these songs with a gazillion verses. And it was so entertaining to see who's gonna sing next and what are they gonna sing. So that was a really fascinating part of their culture that we got to share. So that's kind of the summary of our trip in 20 minutes. I don't know if there's time for questions or not.
Yeah, you got a couple minutes.
Okay, so I'm happy to, if there are any questions.
Are things just overall getting better and becoming?
We felt like they were based on the people that we were with, and based on the number of people who come. The people are so friendly and so warm, which was also interesting considering what they've been through. You know, they're smiling at you before you're even engaged in a conversation. They want to welcome you. One interesting thing that they say, like at the beginning of a meeting like this, they would say, "You are very welcome." At first I was like, that's a weird thing. You know, we say that after you say thank you. Oh, you're welcome. But they're saying you're welcome to be here. So I loved that every time. You're very welcome. And that's the way they approach you. You always feel very welcome. In our mission, the people who run it and the people who work there who have families felt like in Ross Trevor, things are very positive. People are really integrating and moving on. There's a beautiful church there that had recently been renovated. They were having kind of a rummage sale, so I had gone there when we were walking. I stopped in and was chatting and saying, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful in here. It was a church as part of the Church of Ireland, which is connected with the Church of England, so a Protestant church. And she said, oh, we recently went through a renovation, and she started telling me the story, and most of the money for the renovation was given by 2 Catholic gentlemen in the town. So I thought, wow, that's amazing. Considering everything we had heard coming over, that just shows you that people, you know, are coming together. But I know it varies throughout the country. One of the poetry readings that we went to, Padre Gotuama, who I was saying used to head the Port Amelia community, one of the poems he told was about him going to a border town and going into a pub and not really paying attention. He just went into the pub. It was in Northern Ireland. And when it came time to pay the bill, he pulled out his pounds. And a guy down the pub, down the bar from him said, we don't want that money. And he said, it's the Queen's money. And he said, what side are you on? And he said, I'm on the side of peace. And the guy said very sarcastically, well, that's a very clever answer. And this was in Northern Ireland. They take pounds, that's their currency. But he said, you have to pay attention to the town. He said, and I didn't look around and see that these were all Irish flags flying. And I should have known that they would have preferred euros, even though they're in Northern Ireland. So that's something that they're always very aware of wherever they go.
Last question.
Yeah, it's a real quick.
Yeah.
Just curious, you know about the political ties, the Catholics versus Protestants, and I wonder what's their alignment on the Brexit question?
Well, you know what was interesting was we were there when Boris Johnson was elected. We were actually out to lunch, so a couple of us got alerts on our phones, you know, Boris. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's just watch people's reaction because it was, you know, all the townspeople getting alerts on their phones and seeing how they reacted, and they were mostly just like, ugh, you know, they weren't like angry. I think they must have known that was coming. They're concerned. They're very concerned about Brexit.
But are the Catholics against Brexit and the Protestants in favor
I
of
couldn't really
Brexit?
tell you that. I think the whole country is concerned because they went through so much violence and they're afraid it might erupt again. There was a lot of, you know, kind of, I hope that doesn't happen. Not that they were saying it's likely to happen, but boy, I hope that doesn't happen. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank
Thank
you.
you.